Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents, and welcome to the 2021 Summer Vacation Series. We're getting to know comics from around the world who performed on our Isolation Comedy online show in 2020. I'm your host, Valerie, and sometime co-host Miss Purrington. She'll join us if she damn well pleases. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. And you can keep up with us on Twitter and Instagram at Comedy Wham or on our Comedy Wham Facebook page. In addition to podcasts, Comedy Wham brings you articles, album reviews, live shows, and an events page for live shows in Austin and Houston. If you're a comic in those cities and want your show featured on the calendar, just go to the events page and click Submit a Show to complete the short survey. Now let's get back to our podcast. Launched in 2016, the podcast project brings you funny people and their stories. As a fan, I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations, and will usually take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the Austin, check that, the world comedy scene, the best. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us. Today, from Los Angeles, the Mecca of comedy, we are getting to talk to somebody who's got an incredible dry bar special. His debut album, Carry the Pillows, is excellent. He's an actor, and chances are pretty good that you've seen him on TV on a stunning 14 commercials, and it's probably even more than that since I pulled that credit, including being cast as Nerd Guy. He's got a hilarious YouTube series called Bigfoot Chasers, and by the way, even if you did miss those commercials, you can definitely see him performing comedy on Up Next on the Comedy Central channel, and he had a stand-up TV debut on Fox and Hulu's Laughs. He was one of our favorite comics on our 2020 Isolation Comedy show. And now Comedy Wham presents our guest, Daniel Eachus.
What's up? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you doing our online show, and you were, I don't know how you came by us. I think you reached out to us because you were probably just trying to find any performance time.
Yeah, I'm sure a comic told me about you guys that you had on a show or something like that.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, man, I wish I discovered you a lot sooner, because I would have had you on several times, because you were so great. And I waited to do my homework, and I watched the Dry Bar special, and I watched I was listening to clips of Carry the Pillows, and I'm like, man, I really wish I'd had you on more last.
Thank you.
I know at the time of this recording, we're recording in mid-June, and you're actually coming through Austin, but this is going to come out after those dates. And I'm really hoping that I get to see you perform live, because everything that I've seen now, I'm like, I love your style of comedy. So now that I'm done gushing.
You definitely did your homework. It's impressive. I like it, because even when you were reading the intro, I was like, oh, you rewrote these are your own words. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, most people just read straight from the bio. They'll be like, he was born in Fresno, California. It was like a minute of like, oh, okay.
These are my words that I wrote.
Yeah, it was impressive.
Well, yeah, I do like to do my homework. I actually, aside from the gushing, I do like to start with an official icebreaker question. Right. So if you're ready, one word to describe your past.
One word to describe my past. Surreal would probably be the right word. I mean, I know it really happened. I'm not like a crazy person or something.
Yeah.
Did I actually live in the past? I feel like I did so many weird things, and when I tell people, they're usually like, really? Yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, I had a weird past. I don't know. What do people normally say?
Oh, it's all over the place. I had some recent ones, or somebody said checkered. I can't remember them because
that's artsy.
Yeah. Oh, and they got even more artsy because they're well, oh, I can't tell you this. Never mind. Spoiler.
A little too artsy.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one person that wanted me to just, they committed to their past was oof. That was
Sounds
one of my
about right.
favorites.
Sounds
Yeah.
about right. I feel like for most comics, I think.
Yeah. Where were you born and raised?
Well, in Fresno, California, in the mean streets of Fresno, which is it's like in the center of California. It's not at all what people picture when they picture California in their mind. Have you ever been there?
I have.
Before?
I've been to both North and Southern California.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, Fresno's on the way in between both of them. It's usually when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh yeah, I used the bathroom there once." It's like, okay, yeah, that's about right. That's something to do in town. It's usually the butt of a lot of jokes, and it's just where I grew up. I don't know. I'm used to it.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have comedic memories from growing up, other than people saying, knowing it's a pit stop for the rest of the state?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just naturally looking back, I'm like, oh, it makes sense that there's like humor to come out of Fresno because it's just one of those places to grow up. But I don't know if you're talking about like my personal influences, stuff like that. I actually wasn't huge on like watching stand up. Not that I never watched it or anything like that. I definitely did, but I definitely met a lot of comics who were like, I grew up, listening to every Carlin album and this thing and that, and I was like, for me, it was like Looney Tunes and The Simpsons, and definitely more like, TV shows and sketches and Mad TV and SNL and that kind of stuff. That I feel like influenced me the most.
What did you perform at all? Like, even not necessarily stand up, but were you a performer at a young age?
I was born in a circus, actually. No, no, I wasn't. That would definitely be surreal. I feel like.
I think so. There's everything.
I got into playing. I started playing guitar when I was in like 5th grade, a little bit earlier than I feel like most people start playing it, and so I had like a rock band by the time I was in like 7th and 8th grade, which was still kind of a little bit early. I feel like most kids do that in like high school, and so when I got into high school, I wanted to get better at guitar, and I ended up joining the jazz band that was there because a jazz teacher convinced me that like if you got good at jazz, you'd end up being good at like you'll get good at rock too, because jazz was way harder to do. And I mean that is definitely true. I think still to this day I think that. And so I got into playing jazz guitar, and there's like a very long story with this, and then there's the short version, but the basically somewhere in between is that we were a ragtag group of kids in high school who didn't know anything about jazz and just wanted to get better. I mean, I brought my rock drummer in and my rock bass player in to play in the jazz band because I realized my freshman year that I was like, all we do is sit around in class all day and jam. Like we just played our rock songs all day. It was basically band practice. So yeah, it was like we were talented, but like we didn't know anything about jazz. And then into my sophomore year, going into my junior year of high school, our teacher I want to say it was the last day of class, gave us a bunch of sheet music for jazz and said, hey, I think you guys are really talented. Why don't you just look this over? And when you come back junior year, there's all these competitions we can get in. And I think you guys would be really good at playing jazz. And so during my like rock band rehearsals that summer, I would like bring over the horn players and we'd be like, all right, let's practice this jazz stuff and start, some of the horn players knew about jazz. So they'd burn us CDs and stuff like that of people to listen to. And anyways, ended up getting back junior year and being really good to where we entered in all these competitions. We actually ended up taking first place in every single competition that we did across the state of California.
Wow.
Yeah. We got invited to play out at Disneyland. We got to make a CD. It was surreal, if you will, because our school we were a big school. Our school put no money into the jazz band. In fact, this is not an exaggeration. Every other school would show up in charter buses where everybody wore tuxedos and stuff. We showed up in our teacher's Ford Explorer with our instruments literally strapped to the roof. And we wore, the only thing, we wore whatever we wanted to wear except for the t-shirt. We wore, I never really watched 2.5 Men, but I know in every trailer Charlie Sheen wears this like bowling shirt. I don't know, I've seen him wear it a lot in that show, and that's what we wore, was that bowling shirt in our teacher's freaking car. And everybody made fun of us, and then we went in there and just killed it, just first place in everything we did. It was really cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a weird life, but that's why I started performing, and that's where I know this is like kind of a weird idea, but it was the thing that first taught me that, because we would write out these we played the same 3 songs every time, so we would write out a solo if we had a solo, and I actually won a bunch of awards for a certain solo that I did in one of the songs, and it was the thing that taught me that something that I wrote in my bedroom could be performed on a stage and people would enjoy it. And so that ended up translating to comedy later.
Yeah. So did you keep pursuing jazz past high school?
I went to Long Beach State, which has a great jazz program, and I went in undeclared, but I took a bunch of jazz classes. I got a bunch of scholarship money to play jazz, and I knew it wasn't what I really wanted to do. It was one of those things, like I had some like natural talent with it, I guess. I mean, I definitely wasn't the greatest in the world by any means, but I had some like natural talent, but I just my heart wasn't in it. So I guess probably pretty stupidly, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do jazz guitar. There's no money in that. I'm going to get into stand-up comedy. That should be easier. That'll be easier than jazz music. Which
is that literally what happened? You were like, oh no, I think I want to do stand-up. I
kind of had a send-off before I went off to college with some of my friends, and I decided that I would do stand-up in my friend's backyard. And like I said, I didn't know much about stand-up other than what specials I saw on Comedy Central. So when I planned this like stand-up show, because my friends, there was also this other weird, sorry to backtrack more, but I also was like on my high school daily bulletin thingy. That was a class where we, people read the daily bulletin to everyone. Well, halfway through my junior year, I told my teacher I didn't want to do the bulletin anymore. I wanted to be a field reporter, and I wanted to report on things that weren't actually news or dumb, like stupid things that shouldn't be news, but I'm going to make them news. And our teacher was like, that's absurd. We were reading the bulletin. And I said, can I just make a clip and show you? And if you think it's funny, like, do it. And I ended up doing that. And so I was making sketches in high school, but before Instagram and TikTok, and before it was a big thing, and so that taught me comedy the same time as I was performing live in jazz band. And so it just made a lot of sense for like comedy and performance to marry together, to make stand-up comedy make sense. And one of my friends had told me, like, you should try just going out and doing stand-up. And I'd never thought of that in my life. And so I was like, well, let's do it in my, other friend's backyard. And I ended up doing 45 minutes.
Holy cow.
Because I thought it didn't even cross my mind that people did less than that, because I'd never been to a real show. I'd only seen, hour specials on TV. And I was like, well, hour special, 45 minutes, commercials. That's what you do. That's what stand-up is.
Yeah.
So I remember it wasn't terrible. I mean, obviously it wasn't great at all looking back at it, but you definitely hear like horror stories about comedians whose first time was just like absolutely awful. I didn't have that experience. Granted, it was like mostly my friends, but the thing that I couldn't get out of my mind was that a bunch of the parents were there in the back watching, and they promised, we're not going to be weird, we're not going to hang out with you guys, but they ended up like sneaking in during my performance and watching. I was making them laugh almost more than my friends. And so I kind of couldn't get that out of my head, that like, maybe there is something to this. Maybe I can do this. And so not very long after I went to Long Beach State, maybe like 6 months later, I did my first open mic and realized like, oh, I don't have to do 45. I could just do 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So did you have an idea that by going to Long Beach, you're basically at the doorstep of one of the biggest comedy scenes in the country?
I didn't know that going in. I mean, I definitely knew I wanted to do something in entertainment in some way. And I mean, I felt like that would probably be more acting related just because I felt like that was closer to what I was doing with the like field reporter daily bulletin thingy. I was like, this is comedic acting. And so I was like, I kind of want to go to LA because this school is like one of the best like jazz programs in the nation. And also I was like, it's close, it's in LA, it's like acting stuff nearby. So that's what I went there for. And then I started going every Tuesday to this local comedy show and just watching. And I actually started randomly just checking out books from the library, not about how to do comedy, but they were all biographies and autobiographies of comedians. And I felt like that taught me way more than anything else could have of just how all these famous people got into it and what their struggles were and stuff like that.
Well, I'm curious by this notion because I've talked to a lot of people, and every once in a while I have somebody who will admit that they've read a book on how to do comedy, but I haven't had somebody that used the approach of reading the biographies of comics. Tell me an example of something that you feel like you learned by doing that.
Well, the first one I read it had the biggest impact on me, not only because it was the first one, but also because it was Steve Martin's book of Born Standing Up. And that's a big book for a lot of comedians and stuff, but more so for me, because in one of the opening chapters, he talks about how he went to Long Beach State and that he would write jokes in his head or whatever on his way from to his classes. And I was reading that book while I was living in the dorms at Long Beach State for the first year, writing jokes on my way to class. And I was like, wow, this is all like, I could do this. Steve Martin did this exact same thing.
It helped you visualize. Yeah.
Yeah. And made it seem not so, mythical.
Mm-hmm.
So, and after that, I was like, well, I need to start reading about more comedians and comedians I didn't even necessarily like. I remember one example is Joan Rivers. I used to think, all I knew from Joan Rivers was stuff from later in her life when it was her and her daughter. And I mean, to be honest, I just felt she was just really annoying. It was always like fashion stuff. I was, 16-year-old at the time. I thought, this lady's annoying. So I check out her book because I was almost out of books at the library that I could even rent. And then I read about her life and I was like, oh man, like it just was this new level of respect. And I felt like that taught me a lot about just, the different types of comedians that were out there, people that I didn't even know existed, people that had different styles that I, had no idea, I didn't know anything about. And Carlin was another one. I know that's kind of blasphemy, but I never liked George Carlin, never got into him, anything like that. But I didn't even know anything about him. And then my first thing I ever even before I ever saw a clip, anything like that, I read his book. I want to say it was called The Last Call or I want to say it was the last book he wrote before he passed away or anything. That gave me a new respect for him. And then I started looking into all his stuff, and it was really beneficial doing it that way, where I was reading books about people's lives. I learned a lot.
That's very cool. Okay, so while you're doing that kind of studying, I did read that you basically started performing for years straight, and you either advanced or got to a finalist position in a comedy contest.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a year's time, that's very impressive, especially for a city as big as LA with its, gigantic comedy scene. Did you, since a lot of the things you kind of stumbled into didn't realize how things worked, like you don't start your comedy career with a 45-minute set usually.
Right.
Did you realize how big a deal it was that you accomplished that?
I mean, now looking back, maybe, but yeah, at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. A lot of it was by accident, and it definitely played to my advantage. Starting out with a 45-minute set, it made it so much easier when I did start doing open mics. They said 5 minutes. I had it wasn't good, but it was a not terrible 5 minutes because I had 45 to draw from. So there was some semblance of jokes in that 5 minutes. That, got a couple laughs here and there. So it made it easy to start right out of the gate. And also, when I started, it was February of 2009. I was only in the dorms my first year of college, and then my second year, I got an apartment. Well, they don't let you stay in the dorms for summer unless you pay extra for that. And my apartment, I didn't get till August of 2009. So from June, July, August, or late May and whatever, 3 months, I had to go back to Fresno and live with my parents for 3 months during the summer. I had just started comedy in February, and I felt like I was just getting the hang of this open mic scene, and there was no scene in Fresno. It just didn't exist at that time. Well, it just so happens, by luck, that the week I moved back to Fresno for the summer, the week before that, they had just done their first show at this restaurant called Thai Palms in Fresno, which ultimately ended up becoming the closest thing Fresno ever got to a comedy club. It was like 5 or 6 nights a week of comedy at one point. It became huge. Well, this was their first show, and no one in Fresno really knew what they were doing in terms of comedy. There were a couple guys who were like sort of road comics, but in terms of like hosts and openers and features, there weren't any. So when I moved up there, I was the veteran, doing air quotes right now, because I had been doing comedy for 3 months, and most of them just started that month. Wow. So I started getting feature spots for these LA headliners that were coming up and getting thrown into these 15, 20-minute sets. And it just, it grew me like crazy, because when I moved back to Long Beach to go back to school my sophomore year, all these LA comics that I knew from open mics were like, where have you been, and why are you so much better now?
Yeah.
Because I had just spent the summer doing, at least 2 to 3 feature sets a week, having done comedy less than 6 months at that point.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that helped me out a lot. And when I did come back, people started booking me to do like showcase spots and stuff like that. So I started doing shows, like getting actual book shows in LA, and then entered that contest, and ended up getting to the finals of it or whatever.
Yeah, amazing. And then things just kept going better and better for you, and it does seem like acting is a part of your life. I don't know equally, but acting seems to be like it's a growing part of your interest too.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, when did that, is it just the lure of being in LA, or is that, well, I guess you did mention that when you did the field reporter sketches, that you knew that was something that you did enjoy acting.
Yeah, I never, I don't know, Fresno is a weird place to grow up, because the whole like Hollywood was right there. It was like 4 hours away. Yeah. And I had gone many times in my life. My parents loved to do, we didn't necessarily go on a lot of like huge trips as a family that often, but we did 1,000,000 day trips. And so stuff like LA, I had been to it a bunch of times. So that sort of like, oh my God, Hollywood didn't really exist in my head. And I think that made it a lot easier to get into acting and stuff, because I always just saw it as like, I like making videos with my friends. I like making comedy sketches. I want to do that more and try to make money doing it. And it was just something that never went away for me, wanting to do acting stuff. I had done a play in high school, which was another sort of weird, surreal kind of experience, where I had never taken a single theater class, but the theater teacher saw me and liked me on my like daily bulletin videos and stuff. And they were doing a comedy this year. And she's like, I want somebody who has comedic timing. And you might not know exact theater stuff, but I can teach you that. And what I can't teach you is timing, and you already have that. So she's like, come audition for the lead. And I ended up getting the lead in the school play and pissing off every single theater kid who was like, I'm a senior. This is my year to be the lead. This guy's never even taken a class. We don't know who he is. And oh God. But yeah, that was my first time doing like a, you know, quote unquote, like professional acting gig that wasn't just me messing around with my friends with a video camera. And that probably, like, maybe that didn't like give me the acting bug, but it definitely solidified it, that like, oh yeah, I like this.
Yeah. Wow. So I have this notion swirling in my head because I watched a lot of the videos that are posted on your website, like, you know, the sizzle reels from your acting and commercial. And when I think about those, and I think about, you've just solidified that the thing that I liked is the timing. Like there's just a certain timing that is so perfect to those. And I think that's also why I liked your special, is there's a really good timing to your delivery. And I just keep going back to that's probably rooted in a lot of those jazz fundamentals. Like timing has to be so important. And it just,
I mean, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look at it. I mean, that's definitely, I've never thought of that specifically. It definitely might be. I know how I approach my stand-up sets, like as a whole, it has a lot of stuff rooted in jazz, where it's like, you know, I will have just like in the songs that we would do with jazz, you know, you'd have your A section, your B section, like the melodies, whatever. And then, oh, here's where we improvise. This is where we do a solo. And now back to the written stuff. And I do a lot of that in my stand-up stuff, where I do like to improvise, but it's not all the time. And it's like almost a planned section where I'm like, and this is where I improvise. And now back to jokes, which I know didn't come across my dry bar special, because that was all written. But like when I perform live, I feel like I stole that from jazz.
Is the style that we see watching the dry bar special in your album, is that pretty much the same style that you had beginning, or have you had an evolution in your comedy?
For the most part, I remember my grandma had actually said something. She saw a set I did where I like cussed a couple times, and she was like, why are you cussing? You know, look at who she said, Bill Cosby. She's like, Bill Cosby doesn't have to cuss, which is funny looking back. But she it made me look at my set and be like, I only cuss like twice, so why do it at all? Out of like, you know, if I don't need to do it, don't do it. So I ended up like almost challenging myself to like write cleaner, and which I always give myself, if it's crowd work or ad-libbing, anything's on the table. Because I'll cuss in real life. So if I cuss in an ad-lib, I don't care. It's not for me, it's not a moral issue. Like I don't want to cuss because of that. For me, it's a challenge thing. I think it's easy to get a laugh that way or whatever. So I want to challenge myself to write where I don't need it and just focus on where's the actual joke, what's the actual like funny here. And so if I let some slip during an ad lib or a crowd work moment, I don't really care, because that's not written anyway. But so that was pretty early on that happened, and now I pretty much I mean, perform clean. I hate the word clean comedy. I really do. I wish it never got used. It just makes it sound bad. Like I know I like, you know, lots of different styles of comedy, and I would say a lot of the comedians I like aren't what you would call clean, even though that's not how I am when I perform. But it's not necessarily my taste of what I watch, and I just feel like I would never go see a show labeled a clean comedy show. So why are people coming out to see me if it's labeled that way? So I really hate, I mean, I just do what I think is funny, and you know, I don't know.
That's interesting because yeah, I know two others who have dry bar specials, and yeah, you kind of associate that for anybody that doesn't know, it's literally at a venue that's doesn't serve alcohol because it's in Utah. It's recorded in Utah, right?
Yeah.
So it is. If you hear dry bar, the quick association is clean. It is clean comedy, and it just so happens that the two other people that I know that have had dry bar specials, they they naturally work clean material. Although, if you know Leanne Morgan, who's got a dry bar special, she's from Nashville. She's an older woman. She will tell you that she's an older woman, and she talks about the changes that she's had in her in her aging body, and I think it kind of skirts whether or not you would consider it to be clean, but she has so much charm to her, and she just has natural talent to boot, that it's like, yeah, when you hear the dry bar, you have to break your natural inclination to think, oh, they are a clean comic. It's just that they are hilarious comics. They just happen to be able to do a 20-30 minute recorded special that these Utah audiences enjoy, which is clean.
Yeah. I mean, you said the word natural, and that to me, that's the most important thing. People ask me a lot, like, how do you write clean? Like, how can I write clean or whatever? And I tell them, if it's not natural, don't write clean. If that's not you, don't do it. And I know that goes against what, other comics will say, but I really feel that way. Also, if it's not natural to be like super dirty, don't. Because audiences can tell, other comics can tell when you're not being genuine on stage. And just be yourself. I know there's a lot of comics out there who feel like I gotta be super dirty because that's what's funny. And the ones who are great at it are the ones that it's just natural for them to be like that. And same with like clean or whatever. It's not the ones trying to write clean. It's just they're just writing what they think is funny.
I don't. It is not my routine to during the podcast to talk about specific jokes that you have, but your jokes tend to come in pretty quick punches. And I heard it on the album, and I heard it on the dry bar special. But the tattoo joke just gets me. It is. It is so good. It is so simple. And it's so silly, and I don't know why I can handle just about any spectrum of comedy, but I think I realized by watching your special that I just like silly stuff. The silly stuff I think makes me the happiest, and silly absurdist is just sometimes what you need when you've had a rough day. So, it doesn't have to be comedy that makes you think. It just has to be something that definitely you just enjoy. Okay, so let's get back to living in LA as a comic, as an entertainer. How difficult is it to essentially grow up in the LA comedy scene?
I mean, it's definitely not as glamorous as people think it's going to be if they haven't been there before. There's a lot of comics fighting for very little quality shows, and it can be brutal at times. But you just got to find your own path through the garbage. Find your way through the trash. And there's definitely, I mean, it's kind of a bizarre place because you have some I'll be honest, there's some really bad shows in LA, but there's also some of the greatest comedians in the world there. So it's like this weird balance, or imbalance, I guess, of great and not at all great. But Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how. I kind of like the chaos of it a little bit because I've always pushed myself to try to be universal and try to find a way to make everybody laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And you do get a big mix of different types of shows in LA, which I love, and it can be really hard at times. And I've always told myself to like, good, like I like those tough shows because it just makes you stronger and it makes you, yeah, it can make things more universal and bring in people that you wouldn't normally have thought you could bring into your set at all.
Yeah. Did I catch either your bio or some random search that I got that you also do college shows?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so college shows are a challenging beast too.
Yeah.
How is adding that to your mix of comedy performance been?
For me, it's tough because people just assume, this is like my personal thing, but people just assume like you're a young guy, you work clean, you don't go overly edgy in terms of stuff that colleges don't want. Um, but that doesn't, just because, I don't have to be like politically incorrect or I'm not like twice their age or anything like that. There's still 16-year-old there's still like 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds who are just living in a very different generation than I grew up. So it is still tough. It's not as easy as just be clean and don't piss them off and you'll have a good set. It's like, no, this is probably the youngest demographic that you can do in comedy, unless you're doing like little kid shows. And I mean, that, I don't know if that's necessarily stand up, but it's just really challenging. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I've had great sets there. You just find different ways to like identify and stuff like that, but also just going in there with confidence. I think it's funny seeing, because sometimes you'll see grown adults who are just like scared to death to perform in front of these like 18-year-olds who don't yet even have a degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just got to go in there with confidence, and I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the advantage that you have of performing in front of adults who have conscientiously made the decision to buy a ticket to go to a comedy show, they know that, okay, well, this is something that I'm interested in, and it's comedy. I bought a ticket. I'm invested. I'm going for it. And then I think of, college kids who are like just this mass that don't have any idea what they like yet. Yes, they've had a lifetime of exploring hobbies and interests and whatever, but they're in college. This is going to cement it all to some extent. But I mean, they don't know if they like comedy or not,
right,
when they're going to see these shows. So that's a tough audience to turn over.
Yeah, I mean,
I can see the fear.
Yeah, and just, I know there's definitely a thing nowadays of just like, especially college kids now, and the fact that they have Twitter at the end of their fingertips. So like, am I going to get canceled from saying the wrong thing? And I know there's like a big fear of that, but yeah, if you're going to do it, I feel like you just got to go in with confidence that if you really feel like you have something to say or something you want to get across, just do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough.
What was the inspiration to get you to record your debut album?
Money. No.
Come on, it's comedy.
Yeah. I don't know. I felt like I was right on the brink of I just turned 30, actually. Don't let Hollywood know, man. And so I felt like there was like a turning point in my life, like coming up, and it felt like I was ready to move on from certain bits that not completely. I still do, probably half that stuff, but it felt like, I need to, for well, lack of a better analogy, I need to put this on paper. I need to solidify this stuff and go on to the next chapter or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do like I was saying earlier, draw a lot of like inspiration off all those like biographies and autobiographies that I read, that I do tend to look at things in terms of like chapters in a book, because that's how, that's all these other comedians' lives. And it felt like things were categorized that way with these comics, that you'd be like, oh, this is the section about when they did this show, or when they did this stand-up set, special, or and that's kind of how it felt.
Yeah,
it still feels for me like, oh, I'm on this next chapter right now.
And the album came out in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3 years
the end
ago.
Of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've had some pretty impressive TV credits that have been all centered around comedy since then. So is that, I mean, I don't know. It's probably the chapters concept. It's not necessarily that your album was the mechanism that gave you these writing and performance TV credits, but there had to have been some kind of, I don't know, was it a confidence change from that album and letting that material go, even though you still do some of that material, or what all materialized to make that happen?
I've always just had the mentality of, you have to put your foot into a million doors and see what stays open. And I'd love to say that a lot of it was like, oh, it all just came together, that I did this and then did this and then did this. But it was like, a lot of that stuff, it's like, well, I was working on that thing for 8 years, and then it finally materialized. And then this thing over here, I had only been working on for 2 weeks, but then I got in and I met the right person, and it just all happened to happen at the same time, I feel like. And that's a lot of comedy. I don't think it's as like, it's definitely not linear at all. It's very like, well, I met this person at a party and that happened in a day, but this thing I've been trying to do for the last 5 years and it's not working out for me. So it's just all got to come together, with sticks and glue. Yeah.
It's the sausage is never pretty to watch happen, but at the end of the day, you're enjoying something nicely put together. So
yeah. I've never heard the sausage analogy before, but I like it.
Yeah, it's a weak one. I'm still workshopping it. I don't actually know a lot about the Laughs show. Can you tell me more about that?
That was just a show they did around the country where it was on Fox. They had comedians do, I don't know what I did, like a 10-minute set, and then they would feature it in like a clip from it or whatever late at night on Fox National. But it was national, but it was like one of those shows that was on at like 11 p.m. or something like that on a Tuesday or something. Now it's on Hulu, so you could watch it on that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's probably still on Hulu. I know it was a year or two ago I had checked and it was. It was just like short showcase sets. I got featured in like 2 or 3 of them. So that was kind of cool. But they ended up using like my entire 10 minutes, which was nice. Some people only got like 1 clip. But yeah, it was my first like nice video. I felt like I could send out to bookers and be like, hey, book me on your show.
Yeah. So what other projects do you have going on? I know you've got the YouTube series. I think that's a current thing, right? The Bigfoot Chasers?
Kind of. It's always on hiatus and always active at the same time. It's one of those things, we just film it when we tend to film a whole season like quickly, like within a couple weeks or something. And so whenever we feel like doing it, we'll get together and write and film a bunch of them. So we're actually in the process of getting that on as an app on Roku. So you could,
cool.
I mean, that is happening. It's just a matter of when it's coming out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure right now it's on Amazon Fire. There's the Bigfoot Chasers app. It's in like beta mode right now. But the other big thing I did in 2020 was I actually wrote my very first book.
Ooh.
Yeah, It's out right
It's
now.
out now.
I'll
I
grab
didn't
one
mention
and show
that,
you,
yeah.
but I forgot this is all audio.
Ah.
I could flip through the pages so you can hear at home how it sounds. But yeah, I ended up, I had all those first few weeks of like the mandatory like quarantine thingy in like March or April 2020. I was like, I'm gonna go through and clean out my room, and just throwing stuff away and kind of redesigned it all or whatever. And I had found these couple notebooks of short stories that I had done back in I had them all labeled back in 2010. So it was 10 years ago, almost exactly, from when I found them to when I wrote them. And it was one of those things I just I wrote them. It was just like a fun challenge for me to like write short stories. I'd never done it before. They were all comedic. I didn't think anything of it. I put them away, ended up finding them 10 years later, and was like, some of these are actually funny. And there's other ones in here that I feel like I could rewrite or, tighten up or something. And then I started getting ideas for more of them, and I ended up writing like 50 of them, or rewriting or collecting like 50 of the short stories. And at the same time, one of my best friends, he is like a really talented illustrator. He was showing me these like drawings of like a character he'd made and all that. And I was like, hey, why don't you draw a picture for every one of these stories and we'll make a book? And he was like, okay. And then it just we ended up self-publishing it, but going through like the whole process. It's like an official book. It took forever to get it done. But and then we printed a bunch of them, started selling them online, and now I have a book out.
Cool. And it's a day at the zoo in 2062?
Yeah.
Oh, I went off memory on that.
That was great. You really do all your homework.
I tried.
But yeah, it sounds like a kid's book, but it's not. It's for adults. It's definitely adult humor.
Is it, so it's a collection of short stories, or did you weave them together? Okay.
No, they're all separate. There's like something like 50 of them in there. Some are really, really short. Some are like 3-4 pages, something like that. But it was a lot of fun to do, and didn't really think anything was going to come out of it, especially 2020. You're just kind of like, I don't know what's happening in the world. And then next thing we know, it's like, oh my God, we have a book out. Yeah. It's been really fun because it came out, actually, I was determined to do it in 2020. So actually it was New Year's Eve night. I was calling my buddy being like, I'm going to press send on this on this order form to get all these books ordered, because I was determined to say that I wrote a book in 2020. And he's like, okay, I'll give you the okay. And then we did it. So it came out in February of 2021. That's when we started selling them. So it's been a lot of fun to get back out on the road and doing like in-person shows and having that book to be able to sell and like sign for people after shows. It's been really good.
That's okay. So now you have jazz musician under your belt. You're a comic. You have an album. You've been on TV. You've done commercials. You've written a book. You've been in movies. What is there anything you won't do in the creative arts? You're the lead in a play.
If it has the right price tag. No, it just goes back to like kind of what I was saying in the beginning of like, I didn't grow up. I didn't grow up like stand-up comedy wasn't my like official thing. It was just all comedy in general, like the Looney Tunes, the Simpsons, and all that stuff. And I feel like more than anything, I'm just like a fan of comedy. So it doesn't like, I've never felt like pigeonholed to like, oh, I only want to do this one thing or whatever. It just felt like anything that I feel like I could adapt to what I like, I'll do it. If it's acting, writing a book, all of it.
And as we are speaking to you, you are on tour. So as the universe opens up, you are, grabbing the bull by the horns and going out on tour. Again, going off memory, I think you wrote something like, you're touring in the hottest states in the summertime. So good luck when you get down to Austin.
Yeah, I know. I have some, I'm booked in Arizona a bunch in July too. And I was like, of course.
Yeah.
Probably no one else wanted those weekends. That's why they're like, well, we got July 4th weekend open. I'm like, I'll take it.
Is this your first time doing a tour, or have you toured, in the before times?
I don't really throw the term tour out there very much. It's
Ah,
funny because I have a roommate who's like a musician, and he loves to use the word tour for anything. He'll go
ah,
out for 2 shows on a weekend and be like, I'm going on tour. Like, I don't know, man, you're just going to Bakersfield. That's what you're doing. But I did feel like this one was actually a tour because it's the most I've ever been out at one time, which is 4 weeks. It's like 22 shows in 4 weeks, and it's
oof,
I never go back home throughout that 4 weeks. So I was like, this actually does feel like a tour or whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, I got a lot of like, after this tour or whatever, I got a lot of like weekend shows and different is like I go out to like Phoenix, the Glendale area for the Stir Crazy Comedy Club. I like headline the weekend there, and then Laughs in Tucson is a different weekend, and I got Colorado Springs coming up in September, and it's just a lot of like weekend stuff, which is honestly that's like the ideal situation for me, is to be able to act during the weekdays and do spots in LA, and then go out on the weekends, fly out somewhere and go out on the road for the weekend.
Okay, so you're going back and forth. You're not like,
Mostly.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Right now I am on an actual tour, but yes,
Uh-huh.
after June, yeah, I go back and forth a lot.
Hmm. And what are you currently acting in that you can share with us? Because I know when you're filming, it's all hush hush until,
Oh yeah. No big theatrical projects currently, although there's a lot of like auditions and callbacks out in the ether. We'll see what happens. But the right now I've been doing a lot of commercial stuff for the last couple years, and that's been a really crazy, weird world that I didn't know existed. I was, like most people, I think I assumed that, commercials what you get into while you're trying to get into movies or whatever. And that might
yeah.
be somewhat true, but it is its own world. There's people who make a lot of money just
Huh.
doing commercials. And it's not just the flows and the,
Yeah.
whoever else is out there, but it's regular people you've never heard of, people you don't even realize are in a lot of commercials. You
Yeah.
could make a living just doing that, so that's been really cool and fun, and I like doing it a lot. So
Yeah,
I
it's funny as I was watching the clips that you have of your commercials. It's like, oh, he's kind of like the it guy, the everyday guy. Like
yeah.
you have a look, and it's just so in. It seems like it's so in with commercials right now, and
Hmm.
it's like, oh, it's the perfect time for you to be doing commercial work, because you I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if this is all coming off as a backhanded compliment, because
No, that's honestly that's the whole commercial world. I mean, you should see some of these like call sheets or whatever. It's just like guy who's straight up ugly. Like that's your role name.
oh
It's like
Lord,
always like hideous man number one.
oh
Uh,
man.
yeah, it's funny because it's always like that. They don't pull anything back. Like
That's
fattest person in the
funny.
world, your turn.
Well, yeah,
It wa-
I guess if you're trying to make an impact in 30 seconds or 5 seconds, before people click the skip ad thing, you gotta be real specific about what you're looking
right.
for.
Oh, exactly. But yeah, one of the it was like third or fourth commercial I ever did. I get into the room. It was one of normally you know what your at least what your role is going to be or whatever, but this was like a weird last second one, whatever. So I show up and they hand me a script, and they really don't. It's all very quick, and they're just like, oh, sorry, here's a script. We'll call you in a second. Read it over. And so I look at the script, and it says on there, the first person speaking is his role name is Hot Guy. And I was just like, finally, I get a freaking audition for Hot Guy. And so I'm reading through, it's like hot guy says this, that, and then I turn the page and then it says second hottest guy in the office walks in. And I'm like, oh, that's me.
That's you.
That's who I am. And it was just a joke. The whole joke was that, well, it's a small office. That's why I'm the second hottest guy or whatever. It just, I was like, yep, that's about right.
Well, you have to have the stand to the laurel, or the hardy to the laurel. You know, you have to have the the companion.
But yeah, they don't pull any. It's always like nerd guy or something like that. And I tend to get those because I'm not like, I don't look like a stereotypical nerd, you know, like that. Oh, I have tape between my glasses, kind of kick me sign nerd. Right. It's always like, oh, this seems like a real life nerd. Seems like he actually is.
Well, that's why I was describing you as like an everyday guy, because you have a look that's adaptable. So you can do the nerd, and you could do the second hottest guy in the small office.
Yeah. That's me.
Okay. Well, we're going to start winding down. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to have people know about you?
Yeah, I'm also running for president of the United States. And
amazing.
Yeah, I would not want that. We already talked about the book, but they are on sale online if people want to ever get one for themselves and don't happen to see me at an in-person show. It is zoo2062.com, 2062.com, or you could just go to my website, Daniel Eachus, EACHUS.com, and it's pretty self-explanatory from there. It'll say, buy my book.
It pops up. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, one of the things that I'm doing with my summer vacation series, which is a little different for you because you're in LA, but I do ask my guests for the summer vacation series what they should know or check out about the LA comedy scene and some comics coming out of LA that people should know about. So.
Oh man, yeah, no, that's honestly, it's still a good question. It's, you know, there are so many comics in LA that there really are like a ton of people who just, you know, follow or under the radar or whatever. Yeah. And there's a lot of comics who just live in LA who are just like, they'll end up going out on the road. I know some of my favorite group of comedians who I am friends with, but they're just so fun to watch. They're all out of, well, not all of them anymore. But anyway, you got like JC Currais, originally a Florida guy, but JC Currais, James Frey, Samuel J Comroe. He's not in LA, I don't think anymore, but he was. That whole group, like, I don't know, they're not, you know, not necessarily like household names, if you will. Samuel was on America's Got Talent and all that, and did really well in there, and JC has a Comedy Central thing, but they're just so fun to watch. They're good friends of mine, so it's I would say there are some names. In terms of places to check out, it's honestly, there's some great Orange County shows, which if you're not familiar with LA, it's like a little bit south of LA, but still it's still sort of in the LA greater area. I mean, God, if you looked at it in terms of miles, it's probably 10 miles away, but it might take 2 hours with traffic. But yeah, Orange County does have some good shows. I know sometimes it'll get stereotyped as like, oh, that's the conservative area and LA is the liberal area, but it's not that black and white. There's a lot of young comics, like up and coming comics in Orange County. It's a very, very young scene, I feel like. And yeah, a lot of talent, because LA, we all do both, you know. We're all in LA and then we're in Orange County, and Orange County, I feel like, is where you go for stage time, and LA is where you go to network and meet people. So if you're ever in the LA area, check out some Orange County spots. This place called the Le Cave in Costa Mesa, this is a good room. There's the Rec Room in Huntington Beach, which is a lot of fun. Obviously, you have like your Frey Improv, Irvine Improv, but yeah, there's some good shows in that area.
Cool. Well, thank you for those recommendations. Okay, well, Are you ready for your closing question?
No, I'm not ready yet. Let's do this whole. We'll do this all again, and then I'll warm back up, and then we'll.
No, that's not how this works.
Let's do it. Oh, okay. All right. Let's do it.
All right. One word to describe your future.
Oh. Man, I hope it's still surreal.
Oh my God. I think you remember at the early part, I said, somebody said checkered and they tried to do this artsy and I had to stop myself.
Yeah.
It's because they also picked checkered as their future word. So they did this, it doesn't happen too often where somebody will say the same word for both. And wow, here we go. You've done it.
I hope it still is. Yeah. Nice. I should have said checkered. Dang it.
That would have been great.
Striped.
Great callback. All right. Well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham Presents. Daniel Eachus, tell us where we can find you on social media and another hype up for your projects.
Yeah, my book is A Day at the Zoo in 2062. It's on my website, which is danieleachus.com, EACHUS. And then on social media, I'm on everything. It's at Dan Eachus, DAN, and then EACHUS. Very
good. Well, we hope you've enjoyed learning about how Daniel Eachus got to be a comedic genius that you heard today, just as much as I have.
Yeah.
This has been Comedy Wham Presents Daniel Eachus. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.